Good evening, everyone. We'll begin in just 1 minute. Okay, Anna Marie, you can go ahead.
All righty. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our final week of Rejuvenate. Although the time has gone very quickly, Court and I have enjoyed meeting with you every week. Our initial reason for starting the program was to provide the program's participants with useful information and resources on how to deal with the uncertainty we all have faced since March. Tonight's program focuses on the brain, its neuroplasticity, and how it responds to stress. Over the last 9 weeks, Court and I have chosen activities and exercises that were geared toward nurturing the brain's ability to form and reorganize synaptic connections. 4 years ago, Court and I had the opportunity to attend 2 of Charlotte Tomano's workshops on brain neuroplasticity. In her book, Awakening the Brain, The Neuropsychology of Grace, she writes that through simple exercises and insights, we can increase our capacity to learn and fundamentally change the ways our brains function. Dr. Tomano works with individuals with extensive brain injuries and with students who are hoping to improve their learning abilities. She states in her book, through repetition and desire, we can invite the brain to expand. We would like right now to share a 3-minute video with Dr. Tomino. Court?
Okay.
The single most important dimension of awakening the brain that I'd like readers to have is that when you're awake to how the brain works, you are able to create your life in a way that is meaningful to you. Getting in touch with your heart's desire helps you interpret the emotions that you have. Creating the meaning of what's important to you is the basis for guidance in creating our lives. As we begin to understand that and understand how the brain works and the meaning of the sensations that we have in our body, we begin to realize that our bodies are a compass that's there to guide us, and emotions are really information that is there to guide us. So my first career as a nun was a profound time for me, and I had wonderful spiritual experiences, but I had no real words or concepts to explain them. I also had a strong desire to work with other people, and in the 70s, when neuropsychology was just getting started, I found that to be a very exciting field, to really discover why we were having these experiences and how we could enhance them and what would benefit people. And so I thought neuropsychology was probably the most hopeful message that I had seen. The neuropsychological assessments help people understand what we call your cognitive style, the style of how your brain works. There are no 2 brains that are the same. And the more you understand those, the more you can take advantage of the different therapies where you can improve your skills and expand them, regulate your stress, manage your emotions, be more at ease in social situations. There's enormous things that you can do once you understand your own cognitive style and how to work with your own brain. Belief is that elusive power within us when we see a possibility and it actually engages us, lights us up as something that's possible for us. There are a lot of examples of people who come to my office that don't have belief. Often people come many, many years after an injury having no real expectation that they're ever going to improve. They're often brought by their family members. They're kind of lost. But as they begin to understand what's happened or how their brain works, and especially when they see someone else in group therapy or even in the waiting room, when they see someone else that is having a similar experience and is actually achieving the thing that they didn't think was possible, and they start to understand how the brain works that makes that possible, suddenly their whole vision for their future changes, and they begin to see a possibility for themselves that they can believe in.
Okay.
Okay, Anna-Marie, go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to just add that Dr. Tamino's book is a wonderful read. And throughout her book, it's peppered with Microsoft tags, which allows the reader to access certain videos that will provide more information, much more in-depth information about the brain's neuroplasticity. Tonight's short is about awakening from our familiar patterns and invites us to expand our brains with creative activities, thus giving ourselves the opportunities to stay mentally and emotionally healthy during these very challenging times. All right, Court.
Okay, everyone. Hello. As Anna-Marie said, welcome to our final week, week 10 of our program. And so what I wanted to talk to, well, actually, I should say before I go on to that, as I always do with the animated shorts, I don't talk about them too much, but I just thought this one was good for any number of reasons that hopefully kind of spoke to you in terms of the themes that we've talked about, problem solving, creativity. And one of the things that I liked about this video in particular was I think it's interesting how problems often present themselves in our lives repeatedly until we find a way to deal with them. And then, that different people have very similar problems sometimes, and how, it's important to look at any particular challenge or any particular problem as not necessarily an obstacle, but as an opportunity for growth, or an opportunity to be something different than we were before. So in terms of what I'm going to talk about tonight, I'd mentioned a few weeks back the concept of locus of control, and I think it's an important one just to reflect on very briefly. So locus of control refers to the extent to which people feel that they have control over events that influence their lives. When you are dealing with a challenge in life, do you feel that you have control over the outcome, or do you believe that you are simply at the hands of outside forces? If you believe that you have control over what happens, then you have what psychologists refer to as an internal locus of control. If you believe that you have no control over what happens and that external variables are to blame, then you have what is known as an external locus of control. Your locus of control can influence not only how you respond to events that happen in your life, but also your motivation to take action. If you believe that you hold the keys to your fate, you are more likely to take action to change your situation when needed. If, on the other hand, you believe that the outcome is out of your hands, you may be less likely to work towards change. So what is locus of control? In terms of, these are some researchers who have particular ideas on it. So a locus of control orientation is a belief about whether the outcomes of our actions are contingent on what we do, in other words, internal control orientation, or on events outside our personal control, external control orientation. And this was explained by a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo in a book he wrote called Psychology and Life. Further back in 1954, there's a psychologist named Julian Rotter that suggested that our behavior was controlled by rewards and punishments, and that it was these consequences for our actions that determined our beliefs about the underlying causes of our actions. Our belief about what causes our actions then influences our behaviors and attitudes. Later on, Rotter published a scale designed to measure and assess external and internal locus of control. The scale utilized what's called a forced choice between two alternatives, requiring respondents to choose just one of two possibilities for each item. So while the scale has been widely used, it has also been subject to considerable criticism from those who believe that locus of control cannot be fully understood or measured by such a simplistic scale. But this was the first attempt by Rotter, or the main attempt by Rotter, to kind of quantify what he was talking about with locus of control. It is important to note that locus of control is a continuum. So as we've talked with many things, it exists on a scale that goes from, on the one side, extreme internal locus of control, where everything in the world is a result of our actions or our thoughts, and to the other extreme of extreme external control, where nothing in the world is controlled by us. Everything is controlled by outside forces. And of course, nearly everyone exists somewhere on the continuum in between. There's very few people that exist in one extreme or the other. So in order to try to determine which one you might be, or which one you tend towards, let's say, I'm going to go through just a couple characteristics of people who have, who fall into more one camp or the other. So people with a strong internal locus of control, these people are more likely to take responsibility for their actions, personal responsibility. They tend to be less influenced by the opinions of other people. They often do better at tasks when they are allowed to work at their own pace. Usually people with a strong internal locus of control have a strong sense of self-efficacy. They tend to work hard to achieve the things that they want. They feel confident in the face of challenges. They tend to be physically healthier because this perspective, this way of looking at life translates itself into their, real actions in the world in terms of what they eat or how much they exercise. They report being happier and more independent. And they often achieve greater success in the workplace because they believe very strongly in their own ability to influence the outcomes of things in their lives. People who have a strong external locus of control often blame outside forces for their circumstances. They often credit luck or chance for any of their success. So even in situations where they are to, it is to their credit that they achieve something, they have an explanatory style that talks about sort of luck or chance or fate, somehow this external force destined them to do it, that it's still, even that particular accomplishment is not necessarily to their own credit. They don't believe, as we've said, they don't believe that they can change their situation through their own efforts. They typically, because of this, they typically feel more hopeless or powerless in the face of difficult situations. Again, because the solution to these problems lies outside them, according to their belief structure. And they're also more prone to experiencing what is called learned helplessness, which is a whole other topic, but essentially it's an extreme version that sometimes people in very unfortunate circumstances where they come to believe that no matter what they do, the outcome is going to be the same, and in a negative way, typically. So what role does locus of control play in our lives? So why is it important? An internal locus of control is often used synonymously with self-determination and personal agency. Research has suggested that men tend to have a higher internal locus of control than women, and that locus of control tends to become more internal as people grow older. Experts have found that, in general, people with an internal locus of control tend to be better off. However, it is important to remember that internally does not always equal good, and that an external locus of control does not always equal bad. In some situations, having an external locus of control can be a good thing, particularly when a person's level of competence in an area is not particularly strong. For example, a person who is terrible at sports, who has an internal locus of control, might feel depressed or anxious about their performance because they believe it is, strongly their fault. If this person thinks I'm bad at sports and I don't try hard enough, they might feel stressed in situations where they need to participate in athletics, such as during physical education classes. However, if this person takes an external focus during such activities, such as the game was too hard or the sun was in my eyes, they will probably feel more relaxed and less stressed. And so the important point here is that even though an internal locus of control, generally speaking, is better, it is important that we respond, that we are in touch with the reality of what's in front of us. Because there are simply some situations that are outside of our control, no matter how positive or how organized or how intelligent we are. Sort of a goofy example, that I was thinking of as I was going through this was if you're standing on a beach and a tidal wave is coming your way. If you believe, if you're, let's say, so far in terms of believing in your internal locus of control that you feel that you can somehow control this wave and somehow just stand on the beach and survive because of the power of your own will or your own mind or whatever it might be, you're going to have a pretty bad time in certain circumstances. And that is certainly one. It is important to realize that the situation is not under your control, right? But still, so you need to react to that situation, that part of the situation appropriately, the tidal wave. But still, even with that, once you've gone beyond that point, once you've acknowledged that some of this is outside of your control, if you have a strong internal locus of control, it allows you to focus on the pieces of that problem that you can solve. And so with that same example, you're not likely to despair and figure there's nothing you can do to escape, even though you can't stop the wave from coming. You know that you can run the other direction or look for high ground or whatever it might be. So again, generally speaking, an internal locus of control is better. However, we don't want to go to the extreme with it. It is important to realize that sometimes some things are outside of our control. So, one sort of thing you might be asking is, looking at yourself and trying to decide whether you believe you have an internal or external locus of control. And so that is something, certainly you can think about. So just to read some general thoughts that you might reflect on. So where does your locus of control fall on this continuum? So we'll go through the following statements and just kind of keep in mind which ones you feel best describe your outlook in life. So outlook number 1, these statements are: I often feel that I have little control over my life and what happens to me. People rarely get what they deserve. It isn't worth setting goals or making plans because too many things can happen outside of my control. Life is a game of chance. Individuals have little influence over the events of the world. If those statements above best reflect your view on life, then you probably tend to have an external locus of control. Outlook number 2, which not surprisingly is going to be an internal locus of control. The statements that would go along with this sort of perspective would be as follows. If you work hard and commit yourself to a goal, you can achieve anything. There is no such thing as fate or destiny. If you study hard and are well prepared, you can do well on exams. Luck has little to do with its success. It's mostly a matter of dedication and effort. And in the long run, people tend to get what they deserve in life. So if that second set of statements tends to describe where you fall, then the most likely you have an internal locus of control. So just to conclude, your locus of control can have a major impact on your life, from how you cope with stress, to motivation to take charge of your life. In many cases, having an internal locus of control can be a good thing. It means that you believe your own actions have an impact. If you tend to have more of an external locus of control, you might find it helpful to start actively trying to change how you view situations and events. Rather than viewing yourself as simply a passive bystander who is caught up in the flow of life. Think about the actions you can take that will have an impact on the outcome. All right. Okay, and that's me. Anna Marie, did you want to go ahead and introduce our speaker?
I do. Thank you. Tonight we have Professor Angelique Baffu, who is going to talk to us about, she herself being a teacher, as I said, as a professor. She is going to share with us various things about our brain, neuroplasticity, neurosynapsis, and things along that line that she has experienced in the different work that she has done. Okay, Court.
Okay, Angelique, you can go ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Angelique Baffu, and I am going to be presenting to you today, Awakening the Teachable Mind, the Essence of Effective Learning Through the Scope of Neuroscience. My name is Angelique M. Baffu, and I wanted you to know a little bit about who is speaking to you before we get started. So I do have a collection of images on this slide to share with you that I have been a teacher for about 20 years. I started teaching English as a second language in 2000, right after undergrad. I moved to Japan and I taught there for a while. I went on to teach theater, acting, speech, and communications at the university and college levels. I've been an entrepreneur since 2009 and have taught mindfulness, meditation, Reiki, holistic healing and health practices, and have been a kind of spiritual coach and advisor since that time. Some of the images that I'm sharing with you today are to show you some of my students. I've had the opportunity to work with children in teaching in certain theaters, and really the transition of this year, which has been a messy time, I'm sure, for all of us to some degree. So here's me in my mask, and there's me sitting in Austin, and there was me the year before. So it's been a year of changes. I am also a writer and have 2 current books published. And part of what I also wanted to share with you today is my mission in life and in all of the talks that I give. So this is the love declaration. So if you would take your mind and just slow it down by closing your eyes and taking a deep breath. The love declaration, a covenant for humanity. I am your partner in awakening from fear. From this moment on, at all times, under all conditions, I declare I am and I will be for all beings a conscious source of absolute love, and I promise I will serve only this love in you, in me, and in all for the rest of my life. So this is really the core of why I teach and why I share the information I do. Now, as you take that moment to exhale and open your eyes, keeping our mind, especially when we are exploring scientific topics, connected to our hearts is very important. And in this first slide, we are looking at an image which suggests potential. And so potential is the capacity to become or develop into something in the future. It is unrealized ability or yet to be realized ability. And this is really at the heart of the matter of neuroscience of learning. Today, we will be talking about growth mindset. And we will also be talking about parts and functions of the brain and how to really turn on, trigger learning, the process of learning, growth, and as it connects to this course, adaptability. So in thinking about having a growth mindset or opening our minds, we can think of the dynamics of a fixed versus a growth-oriented mindset, the difference between being good versus being better, culture of continuous improvement awoken inside of us when we engage growth and getting better. Embracing our mistakes and the mistakes of our students as opportunities to trigger deeper learning and stronger memory connections, and practical adaptability. So we're looking at how the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system work together to create and retain new knowledge and skills. And through neuroscience, we have actual, very simple and practical measures to turn on learning in ourselves, regardless of our age, to increase gray matter, which is the active portion of our brain, and to develop, strengthen, and improve our memory abilities, once again, regardless of age. So one of the first and most important parts of the brain, we'll be talking about 3 of them today. And the first is the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is a very important, tiny little bit of the brain, which our arrow is pointed toward. It is the yellow crest. And the arrow is actually pointing toward the Golgi apparatus, which is the second very important part of the brain. And so the Golgi apparatus is what short-term memory, so all of the information that you are receiving right now in this moment is filling into your Golgi apparatus, so long as I have stimulated the hippocampus. Now, the hippocampus is a complex brain structure. And what we really want to focus on here is that it has a major role in learning and memory. It is plastic and vulnerable. Now, obviously, it is not plastic, right? The substance of plastic. But what this means, plastic in reference to neuroscience, is neuroplasticity, which means it has the ability to change and to form and to heal. And this structure gets damaged by a variety of stimuli, but it also gets triggered toward learning through various stimuli. And so our primary focus is how to engage stimulating the positive aspects of how we can turn on this part of the brain. Now, what awakens this part of the mind, the hippocampus, is through optical, oral, and olfactory senses. So the more that our learning can be in our bodies and in our senses in an exploratory way, and it doesn't need to take an entire lesson, but a beginning of the lesson to connect into the body, to close one's eyes and to connect inside and to get a sense of our breath, immediately begins to turn on the hippocampus. So the third very important part of the brain that we will talk about is the amygdala. The amygdala tells the brain, remember this, when it's positively stimulated. And we will talk a little bit about what some of the blocks might be. But once we've stimulated that hippocampus with a little bit of emotional, physical, or visceral experience, the brain immediately begins to absorb information. The amygdala, this very important, very teeny piece of us, is responsible for the fight or flight response. But once a student knows that they are safe, learning can occur. And it's turned on by emotion. So the feeling of mad, anger, incapability, fear, these trigger a shutdown in the amygdala. So it's very important to create safe spaces within learning environments. Sometimes we have control over these things and sometimes we don't, but we absolutely can contribute to the positive shift there. And that, whether we don't need to expect immediate results within that turning on of all of these parts. It's really through consistent exposure to someone who is presenting positive stimuli, that over time, trust forms and the student's mind opens. So the things we may not have control over is where our students have been prior to entering a classroom. And in ourselves, when we're closed to learning, often it's because we're caught up in a more primal emotional state, in a fight or flight space. So what we're really looking for is a little bit of stress in our classrooms without it being overstressed. We certainly want to create learning environments that are not threatening. And once again, this isn't just the creation of this for our students, right, but for ourselves as students. And we want to maintain a rewarding mindset, not overly rewarding, right? Not compliment, 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 but to give a certain amount of praise or reward. And we'll talk about rewards. They're actually quite simple. Sometimes they can be just the sound of a pleasant bell or instrument to accent when a student has participated in a way that is positive, or when we have learned something or just accessed new knowledge. When we reward ourselves after that learning, we actually increase our memory of that learning. So even a little piece of chocolate, not a whole bag, but a little piece of chocolate after learning something, or a little walk in the park or something refreshing can stimulate our learning and memory experience. So in order to trigger memory, we can do so through making connections, through metacognition, wordplay, insight, through social means, which is really through discussion, and through using music. Music immediately when it is placed prior to a learning experience, centrally, perhaps it shows up in smaller clips, and after a learning experience can strengthen our memory processes around what we have just learned. Metacognition, which is really the power of wonder, is thinking about thinking. It's we're thinking about the process that we are even having a moment where we are realizing what we have learned. That is the metacognition we were referring to. And so self-reflection and assessment and appreciative inquiry, right? So by appreciative inquiry, I mean to call attention to the importance of not abusing ourselves, right? Or using negative language when we don't understand something fully, or we have a desire to have more of a piece of information. Appreciative inquiry is asking for clarity on something, even if it's within ourselves, if we are having a self-assessment of our learning experience, or if someone is teaching us something, asking a question in a way, I call it asking treasure questions as opposed to asking trash questions. Trash questions lead us to that defensive point, which can close our minds and even work as an eraser for the information that we have received. So sitting and saying, oh, I don't understand that, and becoming frustrated with myself is closing the mind and erasing the information. Where, oh, I want to know more about that. It really is the same idea, but it's coming from a very different point of perception that we need to engage. We also, as learners, as teachers, and our students, require blips of aha moments. And so our real challenge is creating aha moments within new habits or new rituals. Of course, Zoom gives us a good example of all of the challenges that come up in creating Zoom classrooms, right? And then adding something fresh that can provide an aha moment. Those aha moments trigger memory like you can't believe. They absolutely strengthen synaptic connection. And this is what an aha moment looks like in our brains when the synapse connects, and it connects through a form of light energy. So, how to create moderate stress, unfamiliar music at the start of a class or training, a slightly different format for the learning situation. A Zoom platform makes that easy, doesn't it? Choosing a variation in the format of a class or a routine, adding student interaction between the students themselves, offering regular rewards through sound, appropriate compliments, compliments that are supported not just by, oh, nice, or hey, good job. Some of that is good, but it should be supported with, this is what I enjoyed or appreciated about this. And remember, this isn't just for our students, it is for ourselves. So taking note of what you appreciate in yourself when you are learning about something. Oh, I appreciate that I picked this up, or I think I did a really good job in applying this new idea to this new practice or understanding. So self-compliment within ourselves is a part of this as well. It's a reward system that triggers deeper memory. So even though it might be humorous to put ourselves down as what some people think of as humility, I actually think of it as false humility, because that putting ourselves down is actually deteriorating our potential at developing memory and learning more. Of course, taking mini breaks are very important. For that piece of the brain that I mentioned earlier, the Golgi apparatus only has the ability to hold 20 minutes worth of intake information. And if you've ever noticed sitting in a lecture, in a class or workshop, if there's not a little teeny mini break, even if it's the person who's giving the talk, moves over and says, oh, hold on a moment, and they're doing something else, that mini break allows for that apparatus now to dump the information into the next portion of the brain so it can begin to process. And so when we're witnessing our students kind of phase out after that 20-minute mark, and for younger learners, perhaps it's a little sooner, because they're constantly taking in information from environment. That is a natural part of brain function. It is by no means a lack of respect for the lesson, and it's not something that needs to be corrected. So instead it needs to be embraced, and how can we work within those breaks, whether it's in ourselves or in our students, to positively embrace really what the neurological functioning is. So through adaptability, we can create new habits, and this is how simple creating a new habit can be. So we have a cue, which leads to a routine, and that routine needs to be connected to a reward in order for the cue to be formed. So let's simplify this. If our cue, let's say we wake up in the morning and we walk in the kitchen, and we walk to the kitchen every morning that we wake up, or and your place might be different, but for me, the first thing I do is I walk into the kitchen, and the next thing I do is I put on the coffee. And the smell of the coffee is rewarding, but the taste and the caffeine is also incredibly rewarding. And so that creates the cue. And so this is my morning routine. It is the very first thing that I do. Now, there are other things that I do. I meditate, right? And so when I have a very specific location in my home that is dedicated to that practice. And because I have that, every time I see that area, my thought is, that is where I meditate. So I'm likely to gravitate to that space, right? And that creates routine. And through that routine, the reward becomes my mind is clearer. I develop more gray matter on a regular basis. Ever after 6 continuous weeks of daily meditation, a person increases their gray matter. And so I begin to see the results of that, which are slower than coffee. I'll tell you that, but they're really well worth it. And then that continues to cue that routine, right? So retrieval versus repetition. Now, retrieval is giving ourselves and our students the opportunity to remember, which takes a lot of patience. It takes allowing for the students to think for it. if we simply give the answer, whether it's to ourselves, if we immediately look something up on, and it's easy today with a cell phone to just look something up rather than to think for it. But if we give ourselves that time to retrieve information, and we do this 20 times, we have created a solid synaptic connection. And those neurons begin to fire together. And then at 40 times, we have now created a habit. And at 66 times, we have now created an entirely new way of life. If we think about this in reference to our classrooms, we can be more patient with the disruption of students needing to find and create a new way of being, right? So if we meet with our students, it's going to take truly about 20 visits before they truly understand and connect in. Now, of course, the more we can create a positive and structured learning environment is the more that we can access that. But it really kind of takes the load off of like, I'm not doing anything wrong just because they're running around with their heads on fire, right? However, the more I stimulate that hypothalamus in the beginning with some positive structure, is the more that I have a shot at turning on the teachable mind. So I would like you now to close your eyes and remove that stimuli again. Take your hands, if you'd like, and place your palms right over the center of your chest, over the center of your sternum, and feel the motion of your breath, the motion of your heart. See if you can allow yourself to feel into the base of your feet. And allow for roots to spread all the way down through your feet, right there in the space where you are. And I'd like you to keep your eyes closed through this moment. And I'm going to read something to you. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Draw in a really deep breath and fill the bottom of your lungs, middle, then top. And when you exhale, empty the bottom, middle, then top. Two more times. And on that third exhale, allow your eyes to open again. So the poem that I read to you is Wild Geese. If you don't know it, it's by Mary Oliver. And it is part of the emotional reward of our class today. I hope that you enjoyed the information and that it helps to offer you a tool in your adaptability, in your development of self and other compassion, and makes your life a little easier. So, do you have any questions?
Okay, Anna Marie.
Okay. So we want to thank you all for being with us for these past 10 weeks. Just to highlight for you, our last Rejuvenate resource page has information for you about Angelique. It also has additional information about Charlotte Camino's book and how to access certain information about her. We have a page where you can go that talks about the spirit, the mind, and the body, and making the necessary neuro choices to keep us from stress. There's an article about the 4 traits found in psychologically healthy people. We have an article about how exercise can change your body after just a week and a month. And we have several articles about vision and breathing and how that can be the secret to surviving 2020 or 2020. We have several videos to watch, all about neuroplasticity. So we hope that you'll enjoy the different resources that we have offered for this final week. When Court sent you the connection for this evening's last get-together, he also included a flyer for everyone about the workshop that we will be doing, the free workshop that we'll be doing next week. And it's about gratitude, and our little quote says, "A grateful heart is a magnet for miracles." We're going to ask you if you would please share it with anyone that you think would be interested. And again, because it is free, and so we're hoping a lot of people will take advantage of that being presented. Tonight, when Court does send you the resource page, we'll be including an evaluation form, and we ask you to just take a couple of minutes to just fill that out, and I promise you it will be very brief. And if you could send that back to us. And if there's anyone that would like to write, again, a brief thank you note, a generalized brief thank you note to the different, to all of the speakers that we've had during this 10-week program, Court and I will make sure that they get a chance to read that. Okay, so with no further ado, I say goodbye. I will miss being with you on the Tuesday nights, but hopefully we will meet again. And as I say, we'd be thrilled to have all of you join us next Tuesday. And what we will also be offering the 2 Tuesdays after that, December 1st and December 8th, we will be doing a double workshop on called Thriving the Holidays. And it promises to be very enlightening. Okay. All of you. So Court will open it for questions if people wish to stay.